and we can go ahead and jump into some introductions. First of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Courtney Pelfrey. I am the Assistant Director of Downtown Career Services, and I am so excited to have 5 fabulous alumni panelists with us this afternoon. And I'm going to turn this over so that each of you can better introduce yourselves, but I'll just call on you one by one, and that way we can sort of keep ourselves organized, and then we'll jump into some additional questions. But Anthony, do you mind starting us off?
Not at all. I'm probably the oldest alumni here, I'm sure. I graduated in 1974. So there were only 6,000 people on the whole campus at the time. My concentration was in journalism and business marketing, mostly marketing, public relations. I had this great idea. I was going to be, in the marketing business and so on and so forth, ad agency, but found out that it was easier for me to get a job as a technical writer because I had a technical background. I was a technician on the Apollo program. So I started with Harris Corporation as a technical writer and instructor. So I taught engineering systems for the military, and at the same time I taught speech at Brevard Community College. I went from there to several other companies where I was head of documentation for electronic firms and dealing with documentation and training of technicians and so on and so forth. Big move was to NASA. Again, I was on the Apollo program, but back to NASA or Goddard Space Flight Center. And I ran the publications department for Goddard Space Flight Center and for I'm trying to think, the Hampton Roads. And so basically at that time I had 25 illustrators and 75 proofreaders and editors. So that launched kind of the writing career. And after that, I was project managing a project that big and running 70 documents out of Goddard Space Flight Center every year. I moved on to actually doing project management, and I moved from there to a couple private firms. Ford Aerospace, for one, I did all the documentation and management for them on a major project for National Intelligence Agency. And after that, I moved to another company where I started marketing. I had the background in publications and everything. Companies were doing IT services and records management, mostly information management services and so on and so forth. So I ended up marketing for several different companies till I decided to, 2 of my partners and I bought our own. We bought a fledgling company that was in trouble. And in 17 years, we built that company from about $1 million to a $70 million company with 800 employees. And all the time that I was with them, my whole business was business development and publications and marketing for the company. We sold the company last year, and I'm since retired, and I'm down here in North Carolina.
Wow, very cool. Thank you. I'm sure we'll get to hear some other very cool tidbits and things you've picked up along the way as well. So we're excited about that. Ashley, do you mind introducing yourself next?
So I'm Ashley Vaughn, and I am here in Orlando still. I'm class of 04, and I have a BA in interpersonal communications. And after college, I started working for a local travel agency in the marketing department. And so responsible for coordinating trainings and helping individual travel agents market their travel business to consumers. And then after that, I joined a travel company called Brendan Vacations or Trafalgar Tours, which is one of the largest land tour operators in the world. And I now work for Holland America Line and National Accounts Department. And we are part of the Carnival Corporation. So been an interesting time during COVID, but my role is working directly with travel professionals and helping them market and promote their travel business utilizing our products at Holland America line.
So interesting. Thank you. And yes, I'm sure it has been quite a year. Are we at a year? About a year, right? Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. We're excited to hear more about that as well. I'm going to turn it over to Corey next.
Hey, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. So I graduated from UCF. I got my undergrad in 2006, followed by an organizational communication, followed by getting my graduate degree at the end of 2007 in mass communications. I had originally worked for a couple companies in the Orlando area, utilizing kind of UCF job board that they had. I'm not sure if they still have that today, but that was a great resource back when I had graduated. And then after that, I kind of found my way to a local Orlando company that does security systems for Air Force bases. And that's how I got kind of started in IT. From there, I transitioned over to Hewlett Packard, where I originally worked as a technology consultant and transitioned. The travel became a bit too much for me. I didn't want to be, leaving the house every week. I had a young daughter at home. So I transitioned from that into a project management role. Looks like Anthony has a bit of a similar background. So I worked as a technical project manager for them for about 7 years. And then about a year ago, I left Hewlett Packard and joined Microsoft, where I now work as the senior project manager for their Azure Cloud and AI division.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Kathleen.
I did that earlier, if you remember. I'm Kathleen Hayes. I was born in Miami, and I went to University of Florida as a freshman. 17 years old, never been away from home. I failed miserably. Bomb. And I got married at the age of 19. Lucky for me, I married somebody from Orlando. He took me to Orlando and said, you got to get an education. And they had this little school that was starting up called Florida Tech. And I have no idea how many people were on campus when I went there, but I graduated in 1972, you believe it. And then I went back and got a master's degree, fell in love with education, fell in love with communication. And I actually thought I was going to be in academia all of my life. I was hired by Valencia. I thought I was going to get a doctorate. I thought I knew what I was going to do with my life. But the guy that took me to Orlando took me to Louisiana. And I'd never been west of Pensacola in my life. I didn't even know where Louisiana was. I got to Louisiana, couldn't do anything in academia. One thing led to another, and I wound up in real estate. Did very well there. And that was the first time in my life I ever made money. I mean, not real money. And then 1980, I turned out to be the first and only female producer with Merrill Lynch in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I was it. And I opened the most accounts in my class, my first year in the business for the 38 years. So I'm the exact opposite of everybody else. Once I got to one place, I stayed. And so for 38 years, I was with Merrill Lynch, got to travel all over the country, all over the world with them. And I retired 2018. I have incredible memories and stories about Merrill Lynch, but now I'm a grandmother. 3 excellent, perfect grandchildren that are going to all live within 3 miles of me here in Houston. And I'm still involved in a lot of civic things, but I will always be grateful for Florida Tech letting me repeat all those courses that I failed at UCF, and they erased all my bad grades. So I was able to graduate with honors. Thank you, UCF. Thank you.
I love it. And we'll be excited to hear even more about that, Kathleen. Michael, we're going to turn it over to you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's excited for me to be here, and I'm just thrilled to talk with you. So I graduated in 2012 with a degree in radio TV production, and I started my last semester at UCF. I was lucky enough to get an internship at Golf Channel, which at the time was still based in Orlando, and I knew what I was doing in that internship wasn't quite what I wanted to do or what I saw myself doing at the time. And I would poke my head into the editorial research unit there, who did a lot of stat work and a lot of support for anchors and on-air people editorially. And I knew that was kind of where I saw myself in a way. I wanted to try that out. So I was lucky enough to get hired there. I spent 3 years there working on their morning show And for live tournaments, I would travel around a little bit and work with anchors, correspondents, people in the field to just try to help. And then in October 2015, I relocated where I am today in snowy New York, where I joined the Today Show as a researcher. I work now as a producer on the 7 and 8 o'clock hours, mainly doing daily news stories, working with anchors and correspondents and doing a lot of script writing and just some live segments here and there with some guests from time to time, but just trying to help. And that's why I'm here today. I just want to help and thank you. And that's what I'm doing. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, what I think I love is you listen to the five of you, and I think there are some similarities between all of your stories, but certainly you've all kind of blazed very unique paths and had some interesting kind of things that I think you'll be able to share with us even more and with our students in terms of what you took with you from your, degrees into the various places that you've worked and how that's kind of adapted. And I'm sure you'll have some great advice for our students too, as they think about their own internship searches, their own, job searches, whenever those might be coming. And so, yeah, I'd love to jump into some of those things. I do want to say really quickly, we're slated to have one additional panelist who wasn't able to be here with us. And so on behalf of Passion Black, who was going to be here, she is in PR for Denny's. And we were laughing via email. She said, I'm not going to be able to be here, unfortunately. And the story is, in PR, you kind of have to be ready to jump into, emergency meetings. And when the CEO says we're having a meeting, we're having a meeting. And so that's why she's not able to be with us today, but she's extended an offer to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. And so I'll share her information at the very end. But that's who we're missing in our panel today. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some questions. And I will open these up for any of our panelists to answer. So, no need to follow any specific order or anything like that. But if you've got something you'd like to contribute, please, by all means. So the first question that I'd like to throw out there to the group is, in your opinions, what would you say are the top transferable skills that you developed as a student that are still serving you in your career to date?
Interpersonal communication is the biggest thing, seriously, especially if you're in the marketing business and so on and so forth. It's important to understand what's going to make people react and so on and so forth. And I found that was key all during even though my careers with publications and IT services, business development, interpersonal communication.
I'd say communication as a behavioral science helped me, understanding that the medium was the message. When we set up seminars, when we went to talk to people, there were so many things that were so much more important than just the way you were saying something or what you had to say. I would also say presentation skills. When I was a graduate student, I used to teach Speech 101, and a lot of my students worked at Disney World all night long. And so, I felt like if I could wake them up, I could teach them. And so that later helped me as I spoke for Merrill Lynch. I felt like I could read the eyes, of my audience and say, hit me with your yes buts. I can tell you've got a yes but. Yeah, she's saying this, but yes, but does she really know that? And so I think it's the communication skills that we picked up there, plus the interpersonal. I agree with you.
This is an aside, but when I went for my master's degree, I was going to do a master's in communication. And my counselor at the time at UCF told me, you had enough communication to go find another master's degree. So I did get a master's in business development or business management.
Talking about, we had incredible support back then. The school was small. The support staff, they knew us, our professors knew us. I was actually on my way to Orlando to Miami for my high school reunion, and I stopped off at UCF to apologize that I didn't get a doctorate. I wasn't in academia, but I was in real estate, and I'd been in it for 5 months, and I told him how much I made. He said, Kathleen, you're making more than the chairman of the department. That's called applied communication. That's good. It's good to make money. And so I always say that he gave me the wind beneath my wings.
That is awesome. And I know we may have a couple of our faculty members on this call with us, and they'll be glad to hear that relationships you developed with your faculty members were impactful to your career, I'm sure.
I think a big one for me was teamwork, working and to go off what Kathleen and Anthony said about, interpersonal communications, but working with people you didn't know, or building relationships like that, being a part of something today where my job is so much team focused, where you play your role and you do the best you can. I think, learning how to forge those kinds of relationships and be around like-minded people was really important for me. And even though maybe, we had different goals or different career kind of ambitions, we all want to do the best we could. And I think that's something that I definitely still see as being a key kind of factor in what I do every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say I have two takeaways. I'd say resume development was absolutely critical, how to write an effective resume. And then for the communication degree specifically, both the verbal and nonverbal communication components come into play when you're being interviewed. I found those to be incredibly useful. And then one additional course that I took in grad school that I will still put on resumes to this day was a conflict resolution course. I cannot tell you how often conflict resolution plays a role in the modern workplace, and be it completely digital as most people are today, or when you don't have that nonverbal communication, especially, right? When you can't necessarily see somebody, you just have to go on the tone of their voice, along with having in-person meetings where things can get tense, knowing how to diffuse things, knowing how to handle situations that are generally uncomfortable.
I certainly appreciate the unprompted shameless plug for resume reviews, everyone. I did not tell Corey that he had to throw that in there, but I will certainly agree that making sure your materials are looking top notch is really important. So
yeah, I actually, when I was working for Hewlett Packard, I had a side business where actually helping people with resumes and interviews. So I have a strong, deep passion for that. So yeah, that was unprompted.
I have a story that goes along with that. When my last semester, I had to do business in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So I did not do my last paper to graduate, but I was in publications at the time. So I wrote the paper, and I had my team publish it. They actually did it with publisher and everything like that. Bound it, I wrapped it around a bottle of wine and left it on the teacher's desk. And when I got my diploma, I graduated cum laude. And I asked, and this teacher, I won't mention his name, and never gave me a bottle of wine. I mean, never gave me higher than a B, but it had to be that grade that got me cum laude. So I always asked him, was it the presentation or the bottle of wine? And he would never answer that. But I really do think, presentation, I thought I had written a mediocre paper, but presentation counts, very important.
I love it, the flair. Ashley, before we move on to our next question, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, because I agree with everything everyone said here, is listening. I think listening was a huge part of the communications courses I took, and I had a specific listening class, which ironically I did not get a good grade in, but I know the importance of it. It is a really critical transferable skill, because you can connect so much better with people when you're truly actively listening with intention to what they're saying, so that you can be more involved and more engaged in conversation, whether that's on a large scale or a small scale.
Yes, I love that. And I think what is so, funny that you're talking about all of these things, the listening and the communication, both, I would say, verbal and nonverbal kind of presentation, all of those skills are, so transferable to all of your industries. You're not all in one industry. And so it's great to hear the way that you have kind of leveraged those skills from your degrees into all sorts of different things, which is awesome. The next thing I'd like us to talk for a few minutes about, a question I am frequently asked by students is, or maybe less of a question and more of a concern, but how am I going to sell myself to a potential future employer? And this idea that, we're marketing ourselves as, our own skills and our experience, that, that's what we're selling. And how have you been successful in doing that? What advice would you have for students who are trying to kind of sell themselves to that maybe first internship or first job out of graduation, and how maybe have you continued to do that throughout your careers?
I could speak to my personal experience directly coming out of grad school. my differentiator and a conversation starter were the internships I took. I took one internship with the PR department with the Orlando Science Center. And my other internship, I actually went through the Office of Experiential Learning and took an internship in London writing for a travel magazine. That alone was such a great seed into the interviews that I had following grad school, because that was an interesting, unique thing that separated me out from the pack. And I was asked about that in every single one of my interviews. So I think it's really important to, if you're selling yourself, you should have some sort of unique identifier that makes you memorable, something somebody will remember after the interview's over. That was for me.
I could probably add to that a little bit to that. Going to college, I worked full time and went to school full time, which I would never tell anybody else to do. It's not a good thing. But the issue that I have is not me personally, but when I look at people to hire, especially coming straight out of college, I always look at what they did outside of college. First of all, just the tenacity of staying in college for 4 years and getting a degree is good. But if you find that either I worked here, I did an internship here, I did this kind of stuff, the stuff that you do that you did outside of your general studies that will contribute to your vocation, that all employers are going to look at that. That's something special. So although full-time going to school and such can be hard, but make sure if there's a chance that you can get involved in something outside of your general education, but will affect your overall vocation, do it and have it on your resume because it's important.
I think of myself, I think that my entire career was selling myself. I had to get people to want to give me their money and then stay with me. I always say the thing I'm most proud of is after I retired 38 years with Merrill Lynch, I still had my first client. And I think the reason I did is because I could help articulate his concerns. I felt like I could help him communicate the why of money. If you understood the why of money, you'd know where to put it. And so I think asking the right questions, learning how to understand people, learning how to understand their concerns and helping them articulate that, I think helped me all the way through. And so there were a lot of skill sets that we picked up all along the way that just came up, helping us.
I would also add to, you cannot underestimate the power of well-written and well-spoken communication. You would be surprised at how many people don't take advantage of the benefits like resume writing or writing skills, or communicate in a very informal manner, whether it's verbally or written. And so making sure that your communication skills are buttoned up, very clear, very concise, that is going to help open doors, because people that are hiring, people that are looking for new talent want somebody who's going to represent the brand well and going to represent the company well. So just making sure that everything sounds really well thought out, very clear, very concise is going to be incredibly helpful for you.
Absolutely. And I think that even it kind of goes along with what Kathleen's saying. You're sort of always selling yourself. So it's that idea that whatever you're presenting in any situation, we tell students often, any contact you have with someone who could be your employer is a chance to make a good impression and to be selling what you have to offer.
Well, and understanding what they're looking for. If you understand what they're looking for, then you can explain to them what you have to offer. But it's needs, benefits, urgency. You have to understand what they need and then present them with some sort of benefit and create a sense of urgency, and the whole thing works.
That's also important when you are applying for a job and you have to write a letter to the agency or the company telling them, make sure you look at that company, you study that company, and you figure out what it is they need and what you can do for them. That's the most important thing. A lot of people have a tendency just to broadcast the same letter, no matter what they're responding to. Can't do that. Research your company before you go into an interview or before you send a letter.
I think it's being purposeful too, knowing that, maybe not if we're talking about internships, maybe not every task is what you see yourself doing for the next 20 years, but it's trying to take a little bit from each thing that you do and say, okay, maybe in the micro, this isn't what I want to do 20 years from now, but in the macro, how can I use this to make myself a better employee and a better team member? I think whether you're in class, whether you're applying for internships or seeing kind of what's out there. And it's also the, trying to keep in mind too, that you're interviewing them. So it kind of go off what Anthony said, know kind of what you would bring to a certain place, what you would want to work on, how you could see yourself growing. And if you could see yourself growing there, I think it's really important to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. All of that is fabulous advice. And I completely agree. I'd like to pivot to, something that you all have kind of touched on a little bit, but maybe, for our students who aren't sure exactly what they want to go into, they've chosen to study communications to some degree, for whatever reason, maybe they're just really interested in the coursework or, they're studying it because it's so broad with so many opportunities. But how did you start to decide, this is the field that I'm interested in, or this is an industry I want to pursue? What were some helpful ways that you sort of narrowed down your own paths?
Well, mine was easy because, like I said, I will tell you, I was making, and you're going to laugh, these kids are going to laugh at the salary levels, but I was making $11,000 a year at the Cape. And I said I wanted to be in the marketing business, in the public relations business. And there wasn't a job around that would offer me more than $6,000 a year. So I found a tech writing position with the Harris Corporation that paid $13,000 a year. So that's how I moved on. But I do have a young man, and I'll tell you his story real quick. He came to my company out of college with a degree in communication. I don't know why he decided to go with an engineering firm, but he started doing administrative work on government contracts with the Navy. He is now, like I said, we sold the company last year, but he's now the chief operating officer. And unfortunately, the only thing about his communication degree, he didn't get it from UCF.
I'd say for me, it was finding a niche that needed to be filled. I've always been technically inclined, but I didn't have the interest or drive or really the math skills to be a computer science engineer, but I knew I was good at tech. So I was also a technical writer, which what Anthony was alluding to made me think that I realized, okay, if I'm great at writing and I understand tech, but I'm not necessarily going to be an engineer, what niche can I fill? And that was technical writing. And I found out I can understand the tech, even though I'm not going to be there programming and getting to an engineering level. And I realized technical people aren't necessarily the best at writing or explaining things out in a way that people can understand. So I was like, okay, there's my niche. That's how I got my foot in the door in tech.
Now that's why we had 70 editors and proofreaders at Goddard Space Flight Center, because scientists are not good writers.
Exactly.
I actually didn't know what I wanted to do in school. And so I chose a communications degree because I saw the opportunity to go into so many fields. When I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I say that because if you don't know what your niche is, or if you don't know what excites you, that's completely okay, because you'll fall into something that could end up being your life's passion, or you'll figure out what you don't like and you'll find something else. And I was really lucky to get into the travel industry. And the reason I did was because I saw an entry-level position that sounded cool. And I applied for it. And they said, this is not the job for you, but we have something that we think you would be much better at. And that's how my career took off. So, don't think that you have to know that if you got a PR degree, you have to go in PR, or that you have to be very focused and specific. If you don't know, that's totally cool, because your degree is going to give you tons of different opportunities to do so many different things.
I couldn't agree more with Ashley. I didn't know. I mean, I knew that I loved communicate. I just loved it. I loved all the courses. I loved communication law. I loved behavioral science. I just loved them all. And then I thought I was going to teach. But when the opportunity to teach wasn't there, then I started floundering. That's where I was in real estate for a time. And I actually applied to LSU Law School. I was on my way to law school in the fall of 1980, but I was a single parent. And I didn't want to take my child away from his father, So my decisions were many times based on my faith or my family. I went to Merrill Lynch. I wrote to LSU. I said, I'm going to try this for a year. If it doesn't work out, I'll reapply to law school next year. 38 years later, I think I took the better choice. And so I agree with you, Ashley. You don't know what you want to do until you try different things. And what's the worst that could happen? You do something else next year, but give it a try. And then I do agree with you that your background is so diverse. There's so many things you've learned along the way that you wind up applying them in ways that you never imagined.
I love that. I think a couple interesting things, a couple of you talked about finding sort of a niche where your skills are really needed. And that's something I think for students that's so important to consider is, what do I have to offer that is in high demand? Sometimes we don't think of it from that sort of perspective. And so it's looking at, is there somewhere that I want to live in particular geographically? Maybe I want to stay in Central Florida. Well, what does Central Florida need? How can my skill set benefit the Central Florida economy? Or maybe it's more that we're looking at, what are my interests, and I'm going to go try something. And like you said, Ashley and Kathleen, it's like, if you find out you love it, that's awesome. Certainly a victory. But if you find out that that's not for you, you look at pivoting to something else that better aligns with your skills or your personality, your values, things like that. So I think both of those kind of perspectives is amazing. And we had a follow-up question, it looks like, in the chat for that one. It says, how long would you say is enough time in a career to figure out if it's for you or not? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
You'll know. I think
Yeah.
I think for everybody, it's a little bit different, right? Sometimes it's a year or two, maybe it's longer, maybe it's shorter, but deep down, you're going to know. Like going back to what Courtney was saying about the Central Florida economy, right? And kind of what it can do for you or where you see yourself. That was one of the reasons I picked UCF. I had an older sister who had gone there, so I had a little bit of a lay of the land, but I knew that I was very passionate about sports, and that was a city that provided those opportunities. And I think that getting my head in the door, starting an internship, knowing kind of pretty early on that wasn't where I saw myself, but I was going to learn everything I could, but down the road, it kind of wasn't where I saw myself. But starting to poke my head into another place and using the word pivot, just trying to take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves, was big. And Orlando was a huge part of that, as of course was UCF, but obviously there's no UCF without Orlando. So I think that was a big thing for me, was the locale and kind of trying to see as long-term as I could. But again, I switched my major. We had to kind of designate what major we were interested in when we applied. I switched that a few times, and I settled on TV. It was just something that felt right to me, and that's everybody here. It's going to feel right to you deep down,
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I don't. Just thinking, I was going to put a number of 3 years. That usually you'll figure that out a lot faster. But it's even when you're working for a company and you're progressing, and you're going to know there's going to be a point in time you're going to look at yourself and say, I can't progress any further in this position, and then you'll start looking someplace else. That's whether you're on the same career track or you've decided that this is not for you, and it'll come to you. It'll hit you right in the face. Put it that way.
Yeah, agreed. You don't want to stagnate.
Yeah.
You really don't want to stagnate. You want to stay in a position beyond when you know that you should have already left due to you don't think you're replaceable, and you'd be letting the company down and you feel bad about it. Any of these conflicting feelings you may feel, you need to look out for your best interest. So while you can feel it out, like you said, maybe a year or two, determine if it's a fit for you. Also, don't stay in one place for too long and realize that there's nowhere to go, and realize you wish you had left earlier.
I can give you the advice one of my bosses gave me when I was with Frederick Electronics, head of their publications and training, and got the offer to go to NASA. And they had just paid for my master's degree, Frederick Electronics had. And I went to my boss and I told him, I said, look, I got this and so forth. I've only been here 3 years. He says, if you were here 5 years, I would have figured I hired the wrong guy. That's what he said. Congratulations. So just remember that.
Yeah, and I think, an interesting thing to consider is, surrounding yourself with a people or a company where they want you to grow and see you succeed. And I think that's a big part of it too, is you kind of know when you're in one of those places when you have that support to kind of, continue to spread your wings if that's what you want. And, I think Kathleen's a great example of sometimes you find a place where you can grow in your role and continue to build a business and you don't have to go anywhere else to do that. So, there's, I think, both sides to that coin, but I think that was some helpful perspective from everyone. So I appreciate that. I think that's kind of a good transition into maybe some job search advice for our students who are on the call. And the first thing I'd like to ask is just, from your viewpoints as people who have both searched for jobs successfully and also probably hired folks to work for you, what are some of your biggest tips for students who are looking for jobs, whether it's their first job out of school, or as you progress, what should we know about the job search?
I'll kick it off here again. You cannot overestimate the importance of networking. I don't know if this is particularly true in IT as it is with other industries, but LinkedIn is free. It doesn't cost you anything. It's very easy to keep in contact with former employers, employees, and coworkers. With that contact, you have a win-win situation where if you see they're working for a company that you want to work for, you can reach out to them, have some communication with them before. And you don't want to just reach out to them 3-4 years later after not having any conversation, like, hey, can you reference me? But keep somebody that knows you, knows your work ethic, knows you well. And then when they reference you for a company, there's incentive on their side. A lot of companies offer referral bonuses. So you can be like, hey, I do good work. I really am interested in the company that you're working for. Here's the position I'm applying for. I would really appreciate it if you could refer me. That's how I got my job where I'm currently at. It was a referral from a previous colleague that liked my work. So it is especially important.
Your trap line is important. LinkedIn's important. If you have a chance to work with any service organization outside that does community service and everything, after my first employment, the rest of the time I didn't have to do much searching. And I think it's what Gary was saying. People always referred me, so I was pulled to the next, position in my career. Most of the time, somebody else was looking for somebody like me, and I was referred to by somebody I knew. So it's really important that you keep your contacts in your business.
I think that when you're first getting a job, or you're just graduating from school and you're looking for a job, I don't think you should be too cool for any position. We would have interns, or they were too this or to that to do different things. They wouldn't even do them. They didn't even have the heart to do anything. And I think that if you want to get in and you want to impress people, show them that you want to work, you want to do whatever needs to be done. And like you say, if you're not happy there, leave. But a lot of times these menial positions lead to something else because people see that you have the heart, that you're a person that's going to, everything that I look back on in my 38 years, I think all of mine were referrals. I spoke throughout the United States, all over the world for Merrill Lynch. And it's because one person referred from another person. And they knew that if I was there, I was going to get there early, I was going to do the job, and I was going to be prepared. And so I think that you should present your best self every day, no matter where you are, because you don't know who's around you. You don't know who you're talking to. And so I do believe that referrals, raving fans, is a real thing.
I think it's being yourself too. I think it's getting to a place, and maybe, and I know I brought this up a couple of times at this point, but maybe what you're doing as in this intern role isn't quite where you see yourself. But hey, that department over there, or that person over there, they look like they have their act together. They look like they that's a place I could see myself growing. You're not going to know unless you ask. You're not going to know unless you try. Getting out there, and it's so hard sometimes to just kind of suck it up and say, you know what, maybe I don't know this, but I'm going to try. I'm going to learn everything I can about this area. And if it's for me, it's for me. If it's not, it's not. I think it's using time to your advantage. I think it's being yourself. And I think it's just being malleable. It's finding your footing and knowing pretty early on whether or not this is the right thing for you, and trying to take skills from every task you're doing and putting it towards your bigger picture.
And there's just to add into that just a bit, because I think that's a good point. Don't also be afraid to reach out to people who are in positions that you want to be in one day. Don't hesitate to send a message to somebody you may not know. They're not all going to respond. Some of them will. And you can simply say, hey, I'm a new student. I'm really interested in the company you're working for, the position that you're in. Do you have any advice? Is there any tips you can give me? Or is there any sort of like, what would you recommend coursework wise? Start a conversation with them. The worst they can say is no or ignore you. Then you move on to somebody else. You'd be pleasantly surprised. I know personally that college students from nearby schools have done that directly with Microsoft and have gotten hired just from reaching out from a LinkedIn network request. So it works.
Something that everyone has touched on so far has been the value of building relationships. So in one way or another, it sounds like that has impacted all of your careers and your progression within your career or your industry. And so I would echo that wholeheartedly. I think being willing to talk to anyone, talk to people whose roles you're interested in, talk to people who work for companies you're interested in, talk to people if you don't know what they do or you don't know if you're interested in their company. I think building those relationships and maintaining them is so important. And then, I love to, Michael, you talked about authenticity and being flexible. And I think that spans every industry as well, that advice. So yeah, all of that is awesome. We've got a couple questions coming in the chat that I want to make sure we address as well. The first is, if you've had contact with newer graduates of communication programs or you're hiring candidates, what kind of skills and knowledge do you wish or hope that those people will bring to the job? So what are some kind of in-demand skills and experience that if you're hiring someone right now, you're hoping that they have in their resume, in their interview?
I would say one of the things that I think is incredibly important, and this is not specific to a communications degree, is being accountable and being reliable. Show that, to Kathleen's point, show that you're there, that you're going to do your best, that you can be counted on. If something comes up, show that you're interested in helping out to the teamwork. Just show up and be there, because those are skills that are so incredibly lacking in a lot of the workforce. And if you can just be there and show that you want to be there, that is going to take you so far in whatever role you end up getting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to answer the question specifically because the needs are different from every organization, whoever you're applying with. But I agree with Ashley. You've got to be there. You got to be the reliable person. And that's most important. And that's the thing we were talking about. She mentioned it. Some people just feel like these jobs are too demeaning for them. When you're on a job, nothing's demeaning to you. Everything's gonna help you grow. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Another question that came in is, if you're someone who maybe is finding that companies are thinking that you're overly qualified for entry-level jobs. This person says they earned their master's in 2018 in communication, and they feel like finding employment has been nearly impossible, even with years of internships and job experience. What type of advice do you have for someone in that situation?
Guess
I don't have it.
Yeah, it depends on a lot of factors. If you've been unemployed for a long period of time, sometimes you have to be able to explain that. But I wouldn't worry too much about being overqualified. If you're applying for junior roles and they keep telling you you're overqualified, maybe you apply for a mid-range role, even if you don't have a lot of experience. A lot of times I could tell you work experience and education can be interchangeable when applying to things. So that doesn't come up often, I guess, in where I work, but I would still say that find ways to if you get the interview, explain to that, speak to any concerns you think they may have ahead of time regarding being overqualified. Because I think generally people would be pretty happy to hire somebody, even if they feel they're overqualified for a lesser position.
I would add to use your resume and your cover letter as an opportunity to get ahead of those things. So you should customize a resume and cover letter for every single position you apply for. And it's a lot of work, but it's going to help you stand out. And if you know that's going to be a roadblock for whoever is looking at resumes, call it out and address it right up front and explain why you're applying for this position and why you feel that even with your level of experience or education, that you would still be a really good fit for the company and you would bring value.
That was something we talked about earlier about doing the research and making sure that your letter, your introductory letter, is what they're looking for. Most important, don't be afraid to change the tone of your resume either. Like I said, my background, I could write a resume for being a electronic technician or a field engineer, could write one for being a technical writer of publications, and so on and so forth in business and marketing. Based on what you're interviewing for, make sure that you actually changed your resume to match the strengths that you have that'll go along with getting that job.
See, I think it gets back to what do they need? So
Yeah.
you're talking to this company, what are they looking for? And how can you help them? So if you approach it, what can I do for you? What is it that I have that can help you instead of, I want you to give me a job and I want, try to see how you could serve, try to see how you could help. Is there something, have you found out something in their company where, you don't want to go in and manage the company, but I see where you did a lot of this and I'm really good at that or whatever, but look for ways that you can help, serve, be there for them.
Absolutely. I think all of those are great advice, and I echo all that. I think, when I get questions like that from students or alumni, one of my I think frequent pieces of advice is also that networking component will so help you. If you can start to make some really personal connections with organizations that you're interested in, you're going to close some of that barrier or that gap of, overqualified or anything like that. Get to know them, let them get to know you. Like you said, Kathleen, show them how you could be an asset to their organization. And oftentimes then it can become sort of a non-issue.
Well, those are affinity groups. So if you're in a group, there's something, your church, if there are things that you believe in and you participate there and they get to know you, then we're back to the networking, back to the referrals, because they know who you are. And so you don't even have to ask them to refer you. They refer you wholeheartedly because they know you.
Yep.
And two, it's you're talking right about the idea of networking, and so often, and I know in my head, I kind of go to people really making like the real decision makers or the staffing or the hiring person, but it's not always that. As somebody that doesn't hire, but has some input from time to time and works with people that ask me, on occasion, what can I do? Am I doing this right? Am I, all the sort of uncertainty that comes along with starting your career. I think if you're able to make good impressions and not in an authentic way, your FaceTime with the executive producer of a television show may be minimal, but the person you're working with every day, you never know what they're at. How is John Doe, how are they fitting into this role? Could you see them here? Do you like working with them? Using every day as an opportunity and thinking of it not really as an interview, but just as a way to prove yourself and as a way to test yourself is key. And it's goes back to the idea of not thinking any task, right, is necessarily demeaning, if that's the word you want to use. It's knowing that it's all they can all play a role in you developing, and including the people you're working with every single day that you may not be thinking about when you're thinking about networking. But the amount of people that I now that I even think about it, that I quote unquote network with every single day is a key kind of factor in my job and my career, for sure.
That's so true. And I tell students often, you're already networking, whether you knew that or not. You're networking with the people who are in your classes, who are going to go off and work for different companies, who then will become your network as you graduate and move from role to role or industry to industry. So thinking about that early and often. And yeah, I like, Michael, that you talk about, networking doesn't have to be with like senior leadership only. It doesn't have to be at a fancy dinner. It can be right now, we're all in this virtual world. Send connection requests with personalized messages
every
on
single
LinkedIn.
Day.
Right. And I would add in,
all the time.
if you're worried about being overqualified, or if you're worried that your resume may not be up to snuff, if there's a lot of these concerns that you may have, reach out and connect with recruiters. Recruiters specifically can help you find something that you may not have even considered before. They don't usually cost anything. They're usually the company that would hire you that ends up paying for that service. And they may end up finding you a gig that you never even imagined was in your wheelhouse and that you end up loving. They're a great ally that cost you nothing.
Yeah, that's great. We got another question in the chat, and I think we've sort of inadvertently answered it, but I'll make sure. It says, should we apply to jobs that require several years of experience in the specific field? And so another, kind of question about when we see a job description, maybe that says X years of experience. I think part of it is just the confidence to think about, do I have the skills they're asking for, and can I make a strong case that I would be a good candidate? But I would open that up. What do you all think about that?
I think you should apply for every job that you
Yeah.
want to, regardless of whether you think that you're going to meet the requirements. Applying for jobs is a skill in itself. And the more practice you get, the more comfortable you get with that, the more times you're reviewing your resume, you're cleaning it up, you're making it better every single time. So apply for every single job that you come across that interests you.
Yeah, and specifically when you're writing writing your letter, you're trying to get the interview, figure out what it is that you have in your training that complements or matches the experience. Basically, I think Gary could tell you what we deal with a lot of times when you're writing proposals or doing marketing for the federal government or any of these government, they want to know, does this person have this degree, or what's the equivalent in experience for that degree? So vice versa, you can go the opposite and say, okay, you're looking for a person that has 5 years experience, but I have this training, I have that training, and so on and so forth, which should negate that 5 years. So like Amy says, go for it.
Absolutely. I've put out a call in the chat for any other questions that students might have. So I'm going to open it up now. In the last few minutes, I'd love to know if there are any other questions that we can throw out there for our fabulous group of panelists.
I will say that I'm on LinkedIn. And so if any questions pop up afterwards, don't be afraid to ask. When they put UCF, they tell me they're UCF, I always respond. So I will.
I love that. We did get one other question. How do you stay motivated when you are on the job hunt? I know it can be kind of a draining process, and oftentimes it feels like a full-time job in and of itself to search for jobs. So how do you stay motivated? How have you all had success staying motivated?
You have to learn how to accept rejection. That's something you should learn early. Honestly, I can't tell you how important it is. You may succeed and fail 50 times for each time you succeed. So don't let that dissuade you. If you think you have a shortcoming, ask. If you didn't get a job and you didn't land it, don't be afraid to reach back out to the person that didn't hire you and be like, hey, listen, I really appreciate your time. Was there any tips or any advice you might give me that I can improve maybe the next time I interview, or later if that company has another position, next time I apply, what could I have done differently? Don't be afraid to get feedback from people. It costs you nothing.
I have the motto in my office that it comes from Don Shula, and the motto, what he said was, success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. Exactly. So just remember that. A lot of times, especially us in the marketing business, we know how we've had doors slammed in our face. There are times when, but you can't give up. You just have to keep going, and you do it. You'll win sooner or later.
Don't be afraid of failure, rejection. The good thing about being in real estate, since I didn't have a background in that, when I was in real estate, they told us we had to call 16 people to get a listing. I was in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I was from Miami, Florida, and Orlando. I didn't know anybody. And so I'd call 16 different people trying to sell their house. And sure enough, I always got a listing. And so, just tell yourself, when I was at Merrill Lynch, I told myself I wouldn't go home if I didn't open an account a day. I don't know how long I would have stayed if I didn't open them, but I opened the most accounts in the United States of America that year. Just don't be afraid of, just because somebody doesn't want to do business with you now doesn't mean they won't want to do business with you later. And if you handle it with grace, you could call and say, hey, I'm the one that called you last year and you weren't able to do this with me, but here I am again. Let's try one more time.
Yeah, that's great. Because, I personally had a job where I applied to the position and I didn't get it. I ended up coming in second out of a handful of people that had applied. They reached out to me 2 years later on the day I quit the job after that. They actually I quit that job early in the morning, and by the afternoon they had reached out to me. They said, hey, 2 years ago, you interviewed with us. You were memorable because of XYZ. We didn't hire you because in his interview, and he handled it with such grace. We wanted to hire him. We really liked you. They'll remember you even if you don't get hired. So don't let that dissuade you.
To add another football metaphor, Calvin Johnson talks about stacking days on top of each other, and that can be little victories or big victories. The fact that you guys are here today is a victory. That's a day you can say, you know what, I put my name on it, I did it. Stacking up little victories, and it especially now, considering, we're doing this over Zoom, is such an important thing for self-esteem, in my opinion. I think it, as somebody who works and at times struggles with their own self-confidence, I think it's getting to a point where, that script was okay, but I really like this graphic that I made, or little things like that. If you can kind of, I don't say build yourself up, but just take victories when you can get them and apply them to your future has just an immeasurable impact. At least it has for me. I really try to do that. I try to stack days. It may not be the perfect day across the board, but if there's something I can take from it, I do it and I move on. That's sort of my take.
I love that. I think all of the advice today has been so valuable. And so I want to say we just have a couple minutes left, but thank you. A big, sincere thank you to all of our panelists. This has been so informative and I think so helpful and such a good, I think, morale boost just to hear kind of from all different places in your lives where you've had success, but also that you have overcome failures to get to where you are at this point. And that, I think, is a really great reminder to all of us. Students, I would highly recommend that you take that advice and reach out to these folks and ask follow-up questions and stay connected and kind of, learn from the things that they've been talking about for the last hour. So with that, I don't want to keep anyone, if you've got other meetings and classes and all that, but again, panelists, this has been fabulous and we so appreciate you giving us your time and all of your wisdom. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
are most
Thank
welcome.
you.
Courtney.
It was great.
Thank you, everybody.
Charge on.
Marge on, that's right.
Okay.
Thank you. There are a lot of comments of appreciation in the chat if the presenters didn't see them, but we appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Everyone have
Thank you,
a
guys.
wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Courtney.
Bye.
Bye.